I am incredibly skeptical that any sort of military use of force would be used in order to acquire Greenland. It's self-defeating in its own hypothesis.
Matthew Bartlett, thank you so much for joining us on Times Radio. Let's start with the agenda that's dominating the papers over here, Greenland. Where does this end, in your view? You're a Republican strategist. You were once a sort of strategist for Donald Trump's foreign policy. What would be your strategy for the president? Do you think this ends in an armed invasion and annexation, or do you think that, as unlikely as it might seem now, the president actually backs off?
Yeah, Tom, I was there as a Trump appointee in the State Department, the first administration, where we had a priority around Greenland, more engagement, more activity in coordination with Denmark. Now, flash forward, it seems as if the president, his obsession around Greenland has now escalated. And has become more than problematic. It is preposterous that the United States would somehow take ownership by, or certainly invade, Greenland. They are an ally. They are part of NATO. So it seems as if, again, the president's obsession has now escalated into a serious international diplomatic dispute. And I would think de-escalating the situation, somehow satisfying any legitimate notions around Greenland's geopolitical issues are satisfied for the betterment of not just the United States, but for NATO, for the world, for security. So I think right now, sound leaders need to have some very sound conversations because it's been a very irrational conversation.
You use the word preposterous. Do you think it's preposterous that it does actually get to some sort of US boots on the ground? Because that seems to be something people are taking increasingly seriously. Do you think someone like Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State, would countenance that?
I am incredibly skeptical that any sort of military use of force would be used in order to acquire Greenland. It's self-defeating in its own hypothesis. Again, a preposterous notion. More coordination, more cooperation. I think that could certainly be a way to de-escalate this situation. The president has some legitimate points, yet is talking about it in very illegitimate ways. So he is now off to Davos, where he'll be meeting, mingling with world leaders, businessmen and women. Hopefully, the cold air of the Swiss mountains will prevail and cooler heads will rule the day.
We will see how it develops over the next few days. Let's look at Trump's first year, considering we're marking that anniversary since his second inauguration. Out of 10, as a Republican, how would you rate his first year?
Overall, I'm not sure you can give a number. There have been several ones and several tens. Not sure how you want to even judge the spectrum, but there have been some significant wins and just some significant lows. Listen, Donald Trump continues, even a decade into American and the politics and the world scene, he continues to be an outsider. And there is tremendous upside to that. We've seen him crafting a fragile peace deal in the Middle East. We've seen decisive action with respect to Iran's nuclear program, with respect to Venezuela here domestically. Yet we've seen also some very low points. The downside, the dismantling of USAID and America's soft power efforts, as well as now this unnecessary diplomatic row over Greenland, much less the remaking of the global world order economically with regards to tariffs. The jury continues to be out on much of this, but again, there have been some significant highs and some significant lows.
Let's see if we can sort of do a whistle-stop tour of some of Donald Trump's aims. Something like, I suppose let's start off with this actually, Matthew. Do you think Donald Trump is permanently changing the United States? Because one of the criticisms of his governing style is that he and the people he appoints don't have the focus or the experience of government to see through sort of long-term change, push it through Congress. It's terribly complicated in the US system. So he does a lot of executive action that's going to be easily undone when someone opposed to Trump becomes president. Do you think that argument holds, or do you think there are ways in which he will permanently leave his mark on the way the US is run?
Yes and no. It is both. Yes, the conversation has shifted, and many people did not recognize. They thought the president was a mere fool. Yet some of his the points that he raises have incredible legitimacy. And it's apolitical. We've had a real realignment in American politics. So again, much of what whether it comes to tariffs, how we engage around the world, the American worker, this is traditionally coming from a democratic perspective. So again, some of this conversation, some of the nature of the Republican Party has certainly changed. Yet again, you have to recognize that right now, one party controls Washington. And when that happens, that swings back. The pendulum swings back. There is a rebalancing. Arguably, his return to power was off of a one-way swing in the Democrats' direction. So I'm not sure that they permanently change things. So it will continue to be a mix, and we will hopefully find a different kind of balance in American politics and international politics moving forward. But I have to say, his style, his brand, I don't think will ever be replaced.
Let's go through that whistle-stop tour then of his aims over the last year. I mean, the economy is always key to any US president. Donald Trump is no different in that, and he's promised lower inflation, lower taxes, better standards of living for Americans. We had this One Big Beautiful Bill Act, rather confusingly named, but it had big tax cuts, big defence spending, big healthcare cuts, big borrowing as well for US federal budget. Two questions for you. Is that a sensible, effective Republican economic strategy? And is it a popular one?
Yes, it is. The One Big Beautiful Bill, if you will, was primarily Republican. And it was not MAGA. MAGA is much more of a populist movement. Some of MAGA was open to raising taxes. So much of MAGA, wants more federal spending on social services and a suite from health. So there's a mix there. Yes, it is Republican. I think the aim is for a pro-growth policy. But what you also highlighted there is the mathematics. What I would argue is, what is truly impeding the United States, which is currently our Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. These are baby boom programs, baby boomers who are approaching retirement. Used to be 19 workers for every one retiree. You used to get the benefits around 65 and die at 68. The good news is we're living longer. The bad news is it is costing the American government much, much more money. Yet again, neither party wants to address this. Donald Trump has been adamant he will not change these systems. So I think structurally speaking, that to me is the biggest cause of spending and concern on the horizon.
Presumably that's partly because so many of them vote for him, not unlike politics in our country as well. Immigration is obviously key as well, and recently we've been reporting on widespread protests, not least Minnesota, where it led to the shooting dead of a liberal activist, it seems, who ICE say were obstructing their call. That's led to protests that their response was heavy-handed. It's been provocative, some would argue intentionally so, those raids. Would that go down as an effective Trump strategy, do you think?
Well, there's a mix there. Obviously, it starts at the border. And I think having a disastrous policy from the previous administration, numbers that are just incalculable. I mean, the entire population of certain countries, 10 million people crossing the border, coming illegally. It seems as if that has stopped at the border, and it seems as if most Americans, regardless of party, believe in an orderly fashion for immigration. Beyond that, there was a notion of deporting the worst first, meaning if you commit crimes in America as an illegal immigrant, that too would be a cause for deportation. It seems as if that is a sound, reasonable, rational response to immigration. Yet we've now seen a very, very pronounced aggressive posture coming from ICE, which is looking to deport quotas, which is looking to deport people that sometimes have made no crime other than the crime of coming here illegally. And that is certainly up for public debate. And now ICE's posture, including some of the opposition postures and tactics of those resisting ICE or trying to inhibit ICE is up for public scrutiny. It is very, very difficult. I would argue that there is no solution either way. Ultimately, we are not going to deport our way out of this situation. I think you're going to need to have comprehensive immigration reform. That remains elusive. And of course, none other than President Trump floated this the other day to the New York Times in the Oval Office. It is talk. But, if it was ever going to happen, it would probably be Donald Trump who has the trust to do so. But again, at this point, very unlikely.
Let's focus on your area, foreign policy. You can't call Donald Trump an isolationist, much though some people might have expected it with his America First agenda. He spends an awful lot of time on foreign affairs, shaping the world as he would like to see it.
Yes and no. This is, America first, even the first administration. We always said America first, but not America alone. And we recognize that there were two, urgent wars that were created in the last, or occurred in the last administration. The world spinning off its axis in the Middle East and in Europe. How do you address those? One would argue bringing peace to both is a good thing, not just for the world, but also for America. It seems as if the president is also willing, has a preferred outcome, has a desired outcome, a preference for peace in order to achieve that, yet if pushed, is also willing to take extraordinary action. This is not boots on the ground, but utilizing the military, as we saw, striking the Iranian nuclear facilities, as we saw, bringing Maduro out of Venezuela to face justice. I think he is willing to use that. Yet if we just look back this own past week, it seems as if he illustrated and showed restraint when it came to Iran because he did not want to entangle the U.S. In what could be a longer drawn out war. So it is complex. The president is not a pure isolationist, yet recognizes that we have been overextended militarily for the better part of a quarter century in America.
And just finally, Matthew, looking ahead to year two, what do you expect? What should we be looking out for, not least the midterms? And do you think Republicans are going to recover what seem to be slightly adverse poll ratings at the moment?
Again, I expect Democrats to win the House, and there's a chance, although a bit small, that they could win the United States Senate. That is part of the nature of politics, with one-party politics, and certainly compounded, as we've seen when Donald Trump comes to town. He has an amazing ability to bring out voters, both for him and against him. And when he is not on the ballot, it seems as if Democrats continue to benefit. So I would expect the midterms will be messy for Republicans. But again, I'm not sure the president cares. His name will never be on a ballot again. And what are we seeing? Again, a president and administration that has been largely focused on international affairs, on foreign policy, on the history books. Yet Americans continue to care about the now, their pocketbook, their wallets, the amazing extreme constraints that the American family and household has on their everyday way of life. Now, in response, the president is floating very populist ideas when it comes to capping credit card interest, allowing people to tap into their 401ks for housing, limiting private equity, a suite of policies that are more like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. Again, this is much more MAGA than it is Republican policy, yet at the end of the day, I'm unsure any of this becomes law.
Fascinating. Matthew Bartlett, thank you so much for speaking to us.